Hello, good evening and welcome to my humble model railway, Bedstead Junction. Tonight we're looking at a couple of locomotives, and the one you see going around the track now is a Class 35 Hymek. The model itself is built by Hornby, and it's quite an elderly model. I mean, it's from the 1960s, more than likely, or possibly from the 1970s. I think that it first appeared in the Hornby catalogue in 1966, but I'm not sure the exact vintage of this one. Perhaps somebody can actually give me some kind of guidance as to that. But it's in the original livery which they were produced in. They were produced for the western region of British Rail. There were 101 of these made for the western region of British Rail. And they differed from the rest of the British Rail by the fact that they were diesel hydraulic. Now, when the western region of British Rail were given funds to actually go diesel and the modernisation plan, they went their own way basically from everybody else. Now they went to Germany looking for their designs, and the first of their designs to appear was the warships, which were basically a copy of the I think it was called the B200 design in Germany, but it was adapted for use in British Rail for the western region. And then the Hymek is another development of that. But this one is actually built with a single engine, and it differs from the warships in the westerns because it's got the single engine on it. You can see it's got the white ends and the yellow panel on the front there. We'll have a closer look at it when we start going at the station. And we'll have a look at some facts about this particular one zone. Yeah, so 35 was a mixed traffic locomotive, a BB diesel locomotive with hydraulic transmission, and the McHydro designed hydraulic transmission units become known as Hymeks. They were built between 1961 and 1964, so they hadn't been long on the rails when Hornby got in and actually got their model out for the public to buy. Now the train heating was by steam, okay, which again was necessary for these locomotives to be able to pull the older rolling stock, because obviously they were originally pulled by steam engines, and the carriages were heated by steam from the locomotive. But of course these had to be built with boilers because they were diesel, and they could be certainly in the westerns and the warships they were definitely temperamental, those boilers. And that was part of the downfall of them, in that then they were unable to be adapted for the later rolling stock, which was electrically heated. Yeah, the maximum speed of 90 miles per hour, and the engine produced 1,700 brake horsepower. And the tractive effort was a maximum of 46,000 pounds-feet. And they were withdrawn between 1971 and 1975, and there are 4 preserved, and all the rest of the classes were scrapped. Now I think there are 2 of these on the West Somerset Railway, which you can see sometimes in their steam and diesel gallows when they got diesel trains running on the West Somerset Railway. They're originally allocated to Bristol Bath Road, Cardiff Canton and Old Oak Common. None of the class were given names. So whereas the westerns and the warships were given names, these were just simply given their numbers. And they were built by Bayer Peacock Hymek Limited, and it was a joint venture between Bristol Siddeley Engines, who were licensed to build Maybach engines. And Stone Platt Industries built the McHydro transmissions. At the time they were built, the Hymeks are the most powerful diesel hydraulic locomotives operated with a single engine. Yes, and the higher powered diesel hydraulic washing western locomotives have dual Maybach engines. And the Hymeks were not based on an existing German design. Well, certainly the warships were. The warships in the westerns. And yes, this one's given the original livery in British Rail Brunswick Green, with a lime green stripe near the bottom of the body, and it's given the white surrounds around the windows, which I think looks rather handsome, to be honest. Going around the track now, and in fact it put in the chocolate and cream coaches. I think that looks right. I think if we've got a green Great Western engine, it's going to look a lot better, in my opinion, putting chocolate and cream coaches. Sort of, it's a little bit reminiscent of the Great Steam engines, which these locomotives in fact replaced. Now, later on, some of these locomotives, not all of them, but some, received the BR Blue livery. But certainly up until the time of withdrawal, some of them were still coloured green. I think they were given cream ends as well at some point as well, cream window surrounds. But that was obviously a later development. Yes, and in fact the allocations on the Western Region of the British Rail, pardon me, 23 of these to Common, 40 to Bristol Bath Road, that was the most numerous, 1 to Newton Abbot, 1 to Lera, and 36 to Cardiff Canton, which gives us 101 locomotives. The original intention was to replace steam locomotives in the Bristol area west of Newton Abbot and in South Wales, taking parcel and freight services within each area. And also partial services to and from London. And on to introduction in 1961, they were first employed on secondary passenger services based around Bristol, such as Paddington to Hereford. They were also assigned to express Paddington Cardiff Swansea services, displacing King class steam locomotives. They were used for freight all over the Western Region of the British Rail too. So they were very useful locomotives. In fact, some people said that it was a bit unfair that they were withdrawn, because and they were in fact, in many people's opinions, withdrawn prematurely. One of the problems which they had was that if they were to stray out of sort of Western Region territory, then people couldn't service them, because they were, or everybody else in all the other areas were kind of trained to look after diesel electric locomotives. And again, that's an example of the Western Region of British Rail and its predecessor, the Great Western, differing from other regions of our railway network. But anyway, that's the story of the Hymex. You see, it's a very, very handsome model, as we say. Go around the track now. A little bit noisier than normal models. I don't know what kind of motor it's got inside. Probably somebody might be able to tell me, judging by the sound of it. But it has been oiled and everything, so I think it should. I mean, it's always sounded like this, so I mean, I've not any concern to me. So anyway, let's bring her in a moment, and we can have a look at another locomotive. Now, these locomotives as well were so in a particular historical context in the 1960s, was a great a time of great upheaval for British Railways, and also a time of great social change as well. In that, from the late 1950s onwards and into the 1960s, motor cars became available to the general British public, and that must have diverted a lot of traffic off of local British Railway services, unfortunately. And also the motorways were being built. Now, and you can imagine sort of in the 1960s, certainly when, if these were introduced in the 1966 catalogue, that was the year that we last won the World Cup, 1966, I can remember it well. I was 9 years of age then. And that's all everybody ever talked about then afterwards for quite a long time. the historical context, of course, and a lot of great music was out in the 1960s too. So it was a time of great change, but also a time of great music as well. You can imagine this lining up in the Hornby catalogue in 1966, and of course that was the time when steam was eventually eliminated totally from the western region of British Rail. In fact, it was intended to be gone by the end of 1965, but the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway had to linger on for another couple of months into 1966 until March, because a bus service hadn't turned up to replace the railway service. And the Somerset and Dorset, as I keep on saying in many of my videos, is another subject altogether. I don't have any Somerset and Dorset locomotives, and so but that will be another subject for another time. And obviously the modernisation of British Rail and the coming of the diesels must have been a great a time of upheaval for the existing drivers. Maybe who cut their, they grew up with steam, and they maybe started off as cleaners and worked their way up through the system, and they reached the top of the tree and become drivers on the expresses and everything else with the steam engines, and then suddenly they were confronted by the diesels. Some people took to it like a duck to water. Other people, unfortunately, were totally flummoxed by these by this new traction. In fact, some people actually would have left the railway service with the coming of the diesels. And of course, there was the Beeching Axe, which Dr. Beeching turned up during the 1960s. Don't blame him personally for what he did, because he was given a job to do. The losses on British Railways were racking up rather alarmingly, and he was given a job to do, and at the time it was seen that maybe the future was going to be in mainline running, and certainly heavier block trains on freight, and maybe a lot of the loss-making, as they saw it, loss-making branch lines had to go. And I can see in many ways where the report was coming from, but when the Beeching report did come out, it was quite brutal, and must have been quite a shock to many people. But these Hymeks, like I say, they would have served, say, from 1961 through to the 1970s. But then by 1977, all of the diesel hydraulics were gone. And one of the locomotives that would have come on to replace these particular diesel hydraulic locomotives will be seen quite shortly. Now we're just going to be moving across now. We're going to put this one into its siding. Right, so there we are. Now we stopped here now in the siding. So let's manoeuvre my way around the tripod. Quick change of points. I was just going to move her into the station. Right, okay, let's have a look now. Do you want the points going forward? Let's watch her go in over the points. Over the points, look at that. For a locomotive that came out in was originally the 1966 catalogue. Perfection. And you can see its actual livery there quite well now. There we are, it's Brunswick green livery. It's got lime green stripes in the bottom of the body, and it's got the white cabs there, the windows, surrounds, and also it's got the the British Railways late crest you can see there on the side of the locomotive. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Hymek Class 35. These are hydraulic. Now the locomotive you can see just beyond it is what we're going to be seeing next. It's a Class 31. Now we just put the controller into reverse, and again we're just going to quickly change the points. There we are, so hopefully we'll have a successful departure in just a few moments. Right, let's have a look now. Here it comes. Gliding out of the station. Over the points. And this model is built by a company called Airfix. Now a lot of people would know Airfix for their model aeroplanes, and in fact that's what I was mainly acquainted with Airfix by, because I used to build lots of model aeroplanes during my younger years. I didn't get into model railways until my 30s. There's a couple of reasons for that really. I think one reason is that I lived in a very, very busy household with 5 children, and you know, really there wouldn't have been the space to put a railway out on a permanent basis. You know, really, it was quite a busy house that we lived in, quite lively and busy. And I was more into my model aeroplanes. I had many happy years building those. I got into trains in my 30s when I started to travel on the railways a lot. Well, that's a different story, but that's how I got interested into railways, and I ended up visiting steam railways and getting into model railways. So my interest in model railways didn't start in earnest until my early 30s. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up and change the points in just a second. Then we'll watch this one going round the track. An Airfix Class 31. So we've got a quick change of points there, and we should be ready to for that signal to change. Well, you can imagine it's changing anyway. And here we go. So we're going to put the into forward gear. Now, if we're looking at the actual model, we can see going around here now. This model came out in 1975. But I think that's when Airfix actually began producing their range of model railway locomotives. Like I said, before then, certainly with me, they were more known for model aeroplanes and model cars. I built a plastic Lotus Cortina once, I think, and I built a lot of sort of Spitfires and Messerschmitt 109s, that sort of thing. You know, so that's what Airfix. And suddenly they were producing a range of model railway items. Now, for its time, they were very highly detailed models, and certainly in many ways quite in advance of anything else that was available from anybody else. Now, the Class 31s, these came onto the western region of British Rail in the late 1960s. And I think there would have been the intention to gradually graft in diesel electric locomotives to replace the diesel hydraulics, which are in the process of being deemed as non-standard and deemed to be withdrawn. Okay, so this is the Class 31 going round. It's in green with white bands around it, so this is a very early livery, I would say. So it's got the again, it's got the late crest, which we saw appearing on steam locomotives. So they carried over the British Railways crest, and then later on into the 1970s, you got to see the blue more and more. I think that the blue identity might have started, blue period might have started in the mid 60s, I think. But then you've got to see more and more blue locomotives. But I'm dealing with really from the changeover from steam to diesel. That was my kind of period that I was started to cover when I first started my modern railway interest. We've got our Class 31. Just watch her going round and round the track there, quite elegantly. Yeah, now the British Rail Class 31 diesel locomotives, also known as Brush Type 2. Originally the Class 30 were built by brush traction from 1957 to 1962. They were built in two series, 5500 to 5699 and 5800 to 5862. And construction of the first locomotive was completed in the final week of September 1957. So obviously these were introduced quite a long time before the final withdrawal of steam on British railways. If I remember, the final withdrawal of British railway steam was in 1968, I think. Now the first Class 31 actually entered service in November 1957, and it was one of the pilot scheme locomotives ordered by British Railways to replace steam traction. Now the first series of locomotives had a top speed of 80 miles per hour, but then the remainder of locomotives, I mean D5500 to 5534 could do 80 miles per hour, and the remainder could do 90. They were obviously increasing their performance regarding speed. And initial deliveries of Class 31 locomotives were to Stratford Depot in East London, and deliveries continued with Class 31 locomotives going to the eastern and northeastern regions. Now they were first used on the Great Western Region, the Western Region of British Rail, in 1969. So that would have been when the diesel hydraulics were still being used on the Western Region of British Rail. So my guess is it was intended to actually gradually phase these locomotives in to replace the diesel hydraulics. And the first one was actually allocated at Old Oak Common to work empty coaching stock, train to the Paddington. Now, as far as the Western Region of British Rail, which is my area of interest, 13 of these were actually allocated to Bristol Bath Road, and 19 to Old Oak Common. And I think they were, I think they're still in use today. I mean, so somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong. Now, certainly they were definitely, well, the final 4 EWS locomotives were built in February 2001. So they were, I mean, they were obviously gradually withdrawn, and some have found their way into preservation as well. Around 26 locomotives have been purchased and preserved, used on heritage railways around the UK. So quite a healthy number have actually been preserved. When you bear in mind that certainly with some locomotives only 1 or 2 have been actually preserved, that's quite a healthy number to reach preservation. Now, and this is obviously definitely a sign of what their usefulness was to British Railways. Now, a lot of people might sort of mourn the loss of steam, which, yeah, and I love my steam engines, of course I do, but the British Rail Modernisation Plan, they saw it as something which had to go ahead. Certainly the Wilson government of the 1960s were talking about the white heat of technology. And so maybe they just saw that the steam locomotives were you know, sort of something of the past, and diesel locomotives were something for the future. And there was also obviously going to be North Sea oil becoming prevalent, so maybe they thought, you know, it was going to be the future way to go with diesel locomotives. And of course, by 1969, when these found their way onto the western region of British Rail, that was when men first went to the moon. So, you know, you can sort of, in a way, sort of see that there would have been a kind of a transition in the technologies. People were interested in new technological developments. And then the intercity 125s came on stream after this. And of course it was intended to be the advanced passenger train, which was basically, I mean, people made fun of the advanced passenger train, but really they suffered from lack of funds and certainly and lack of interest from the government of the day, in my opinion. The advanced passenger train, of course, what's there now? Pendolinos on our railways. That could be in our advanced passenger trains on the tracks there instead. But they weren't. I don't think they were given enough development time. And of course, there was the adverse publicity given with some of their first runs. But you need to bear in mind that they were actually the advanced passenger train was brought in with very low funding. But I mean, that's a different subject for another time again. I'll probably maybe stray away from our Class 31s. But it gives you the history and the time of when these diesel locomotives were coming on stream. And so some of the great changes which were occurring in Britain. Certainly great changes in socially, fashion, music. You know, the Mini came out, so you know a lot of people bought the Mini car, and that put a lot of people away from railways. And it was a time of great upheaval and great changes. But of course, a lot of our railways do actually survive. Not all of the railways were closed under the Breaching Acts. That's something which is good. And we're watching our Class 31 go round, knowing that more than 20 of these were actually preserved. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring our Class 31 in. We're about to run out of time which we can record on this particular camera. It seems to freak out on the 30-minute mark. So in a minute it will say it's overreaching its limit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bid you farewell for now. And hopefully this has given you some sort of interest in this particular one. Before I go, I will show you the box that this locomotive came in, our Class 31 Airfix. You see, Class 31 diesel locomotive, BR green livery. Airfix railway system. Cost me £20 when I bought this in the mid-1990s. You can see there from the bottom of the boxes, you know, it's been well used over the years, and it's come back into use for me now. Okay, so if you enjoyed watching this video, if you have, then press like and subscribe and ring the bell and to see future videos of mine. And thank you very much for your interest, and thank you very, very much for watching. I should bid you farewell now. Thank you very much, and good night.